Gene Deal has been generating significant attention recently by appearing on numerous interviews, podcasts, and live streams. In these appearances, he continues to disclose one story after another concerning Sean Diddy Combs and the concealed, darker aspects of the bad boy era that were never intended to be revealed publicly. Yet even as he speaks out, Gene acknowledges that he is proceeding with extreme caution, constantly appearing as though he is looking over his shoulder, fully aware of just how powerful Diddy remains and what measures he might be prepared to take in order to silence individuals. This particular element makes the entire matter even more grave and intense. Roger Bonds, who previously served as Diddy's head of security, has now come forward with his own startling disclosure. He stated that he was once given direct instructions to pursue and confront people who had crossed Diddy. This revelation does not merely support Gene's accounts, it renders the overall situation considerably more alarming and worrisome. This goes far beyond ordinary drama or typical online gossip. When an individual such as Roger Bonds, who is deeply embedded within that inner circle, chooses to speak publicly, his words carry substantial weight and authenticity. He observed that environment with his own eyes, experienced its darker elements at close range, and now he expresses concern that the same methods of intimidation, control, and silencing could potentially be directed toward Gene Deal. What adds even greater chill to the situation is the fact that Gene is not attempting to create any conflict or deliberately provoke anyone. He is simply recounting his own personal truth and discussing the experiences he genuinely lived through during his time associated with Bad Boy. However, those truths may now carry a very real and substantial risk. Let's examine this situation with care because what is unfolding here extends far beyond merely a handful of viral statements and allegations. This concerns a powerful empire that is currently facing intense scrutiny, a significant federal case that is approaching, and insiders who are at last stepping forward to discuss matters that were never supposed to reach the public domain. The further one delves into it, the more disturbing and unsettling it grows. First, it is essential to recognize precisely who is involved in this matter. Roger Bonds is far from being just another arbitrary voice appearing online. From 2003 to 2012, he held the position of head of security for Sean Diddy Combs, a responsibility that positioned him directly at the heart of all activities taking place. He was not simply watching entrances. He was tasked with safeguarding Diddy during high-stakes environments such as nightclubs, award ceremonies, and private situations that most individuals never witness. As time progressed, Bonds went beyond merely offering security. He also paid close attention to everything occurring around him. He observed the ways in which power was exercised behind the scenes, how disputes were resolved, and how influence could be applied to direct and manage results. According to his personal descriptions, those observations eventually became overwhelming for him, which prompted him to depart from the position. In recent years, Bonds has begun to share more openly about the events he witnessed during that time. When he speaks, audiences pay close attention not due to hearsay or speculation, but because his viewpoint stems directly from having been immersed inside that environment and witnessing it personally. Now let's discuss Gene Deal. If you have been following developments in this story, you have likely noticed his name surfacing with increasing frequency. Gene is not an external observer merely viewing events from afar. He was present right at the center during the ascent of Bad Boy Records, at the time when Sean Diddy Combs was developing the careers of major figures such as the notorious B.I.G. and Mace, artists who contributed significantly to defining an entire period of hip-hop music. Gene was not simply observing history unfold, he was actively participating in the machinery that was creating it. He was there in the background at packed concerts, outside VIP areas, and in hotel hallways where critical decisions were reached and secrets were carefully guarded. After he distanced himself from Bad Boy, Gene Deal began to speak publicly and reveal what life was truly like once the glamour and public image were stripped away. What adds even greater strength to his narrative is that after his departure, his successor Roger Bonds also came forward, verifying multiple aspects of Gene's accounts based on his own direct experiences. When the two men's testimonies are placed alongside each other, the parallels and points of agreement become extremely difficult to dismiss. This does not simply lend greater credibility to Gene's statements. It reinforces the notion that there is likely far more substance behind his story than many people initially assumed. This is precisely where the distinct contrast between the two becomes clearly evident. While Roger Bonds presents himself as composed, deliberate, and exceptionally cautious with each word he utters, Gene Deal represents the complete opposite. He is direct, unrestrained, and frequently highly passionate, expressing himself with a depth of genuine emotion that comes across less like a scripted declaration, and more like years of suppressed truth finally being released without restraint. That particular kind of unfiltered genuineness is exactly why his interviews have been circulating so rapidly and reaching such wide audiences. People form a strong connection with the intensity, the irritation, and the sense that he is withholding nothing whatsoever. However, that very same powerful energy also draws a very bright and focused spotlight onto him, and that spotlight can swiftly transform into a hazardous target. Because when an individual is not only narrating events but delivering them with authentic feeling, frustration, and total candor without any filter, they become extremely difficult to overlook. For someone like Sean Diddy Combs, who constructed his entire empire upon principles of control and influence, a voice such as Gene Deal's is not merely bothersome. It can readily be perceived as a genuine and significant danger. In a recent appearance on a podcast, Roger Bonds made a highly alarming assertion. He claimed that Sean Diddy Combs had once personally directed him and other members of the team to physically target Gene Deal and another bad boy insider named Mark Curry. According to Bonds, these instructions were not merely hearsay or indirect reports. They were explicit orders that he himself had received. He stated that he decided against fully executing them. He recounted being instructed to move against Gene and Mark for the simple reason that they had spoken publicly about certain matters. If this account is accurate, it creates an image of an individual who responds with aggression toward any form of criticism, an approach that clearly surpasses ordinary personal disagreements. This is what renders Bond's recent caution so grave and noteworthy. From his standpoint, this is not simply ancient history from earlier times. It indicates the existence of an ongoing pattern. The concern he is expressing is that if such directives were issued in the past, comparable actions could be anticipated in the present, particularly during a period when there is such heavy legal pressure mounting. Bonds did not frame his comments as entertainment or sensationalism. His communication came across more as a sincere alert and advisory, intended to caution Gene Deal to remain vigilant and prepared. Regardless of whether every particular detail is accepted, the seriousness of his tone made one point unmistakably clear. From his viewpoint, this matter should not be regarded casually in any way, as circumstances can So, how did Gene Deal react to all of this information? He responded in a manner that is rarely encountered in situations of this nature, with genuine, candid, and completely unfiltered fear. In a recent interview, Gene openly acknowledged that he now feels the requirement for protection. He stated that the threats directed at him are substantial, that he believes individuals may already be taking steps against him, and that he no longer feels secure unless he remains constantly observant of his surroundings and stays highly alert. Consider that reality for a moment. This is a person who once dedicated years to protecting Sean Diddy Combs, one of the most influential personalities in the entire music industry, and now he is the one declaring that he may require security measures simply to ensure his own safety. That total reversal speaks volumes on its own. It clearly demonstrates just how severe and unsettling the circumstances have grown from Gene Deal's perspective. Gene Deal also recounted a stressful incident that occurred outside a courthouse where he believes he may have already been singled out. According to his description, a YouTuber continued to provoke him, trailed him persistently, and repeatedly insulted him. The encounter eventually escalated, and Gene claims he knocked the individual unconscious. Yet from his viewpoint, it was not simply an isolated altercation. He interpreted it as part of a larger scheme, an effort to lure him, test his patience, and destabilize him while he is already dealing with considerable strain. Whether that particular interpretation is entirely correct or not, the underlying fear evident in his statements is entirely comprehensible. When a person already senses that they are being monitored or has received warnings that influential figures might be pursuing them, even routine daily interactions can begin to appear as genuine dangers.
Just talking all that shit, Gene paid his dues. Because I came here and talked about the character of this dude who wanted me dead. I been knew that. He ain't saying nothing I didn't know. Y'all can find somebody else to play with. That goes to show you what kind of dude this is. Instead of coming to the table to save Big and Tupac, he said, this what kind of character that y'all out here saying that y'all standing up for. People are still alive. Eric B, Big D, Suge Knight. They was going to squash this East Coast, West Coast before Pac, before Big was dead. He wouldn't even send a representative to the table. Not a table that he ate off of. The table that he got his millions from is having his ass for dessert. No Diddy.
How many stories are staying hidden right now because people are afraid of ending up in the same position as Gene Deal? That's the bigger question being raised here. At this point, it's not just about Roger Bonds and Gene Deal versus Sean Diddy Combs. It's become a wider conversation about accountability, about whether powerful figures in the music industry can continue operating without facing scrutiny, and whether fear keeps people silent, or whether more voices will eventually step forward despite the risks. Because from this perspective, what's unfolding looks like the slow collapse of an empire. Each new claim, each interview, and each viral clip adds another layer to a story that feels far from finished.
Yet with every new viral excerpt that emerges, the overall tension continues to intensify and amplify. That increased visibility has now become a double-edged sword for Gene Deal. It provides him with a degree of public exposure that can offer him some measure of protection in certain respects, but simultaneously it positions him directly within the path of potential harm. At present, he finds himself navigating a challenging equilibrium in which the additional attention can either contribute to his safety or render him even more exposed and susceptible. How many additional stories remain concealed at this moment simply because individuals are fearful of finding themselves in the same perilous position as Gene Deal? This has emerged as the larger and more significant question being raised in this context. At this stage, the situation is no longer limited to Roger Bonds and Gene Deal opposing Sean Diddy Combs. It has evolved into a much broader discussion concerning accountability, concerning whether influential personalities within the music industry can continue to function without meaningful examination, and whether fear will persist in silencing people, or whether additional voices will ultimately emerge despite the dangers involved. Because from this perspective, what is taking place resembles the gradual disintegration of a once dominant empire. Each fresh allegation, each new interview, and each widely shared clip contributes another dimension to a narrative that still appears very far from reaching any form of conclusion.